Okay, we'll give this one more go and see whether it works. I did try to stream just a minute ago and was dropping frames all over the place, so I've just done a quick restart and hopefully that sorts it. If not, I'll just record it offline and then do it. So hopefully all okay. Since yesterday, I haven't touched this other than to hop back in, because there was one more thing I wanted to do with it and talk through with regards to routing. Yesterday, you might remember we went through and did all 18 holes, and we were trying to use the coastline as much as we possibly could, but not always in the same way. So we had this kind of little central feature that we kept tweaking, which was this area down here, and that's going to be one of the things we want to do, and trying to make the most of that. We then kind of swing around this side a little bit more for the back nine, which also loops around the clubhouse in quite a nice little way, so that you get this little reminder of that coastline on 17 before playing back up to the clubhouse via 18. So what I wanted to do today a little bit was talk about what we might be able to do to tie different areas of the course together and kind of give you a bit more of that, I guess, the anchor we were talking about yesterday. So one of the things you're going to remember is this coastline, and coastal holes will take care of themselves usually if you do them well. It's pretty easy to have the ocean be memorable when you see it and have the holes along them play really well, because you can either use the water as a hazard or a backdrop, and I'm not really decided how I would use it yet on this one. What's going to be trickier is tying together kind of the inland holes, because you don't really want basically every hole that isn't a coastal hole to just feel a bit mundane. Starting to drop frames a little bit already. We'll see how we go. Now, one of the things I wanted to look at then was what kind of features could we use to tie these together and basically talking about a hazard that's interesting, but also one that doesn't feel like it's too repetitive, but equally kind of grounds you in the course and makes you feel that it's all part of the same course. And I think this is the hardest thing to do in terms of design, is come up with one big feature that maybe you use to tie into the course the whole way without it feeling like it's being overused. Now, that could be a bunker style, so it could be waste bunkers, it could be a river, it could be the ocean. We're going to look at something a little bit different with this one. So I wanted to take a little bit of inspiration from Pasatiempo and incorporate a barranca, which is, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's a little ravine. Now, that's going to function kind of like a bunker, except it will play more punitively and it will be planted. So essentially what it will be is a drop in the land, which I'll have planted with kind of buried trees and what have you. And we'll make it play throughout kind of a number of the holes that don't have the ocean in play. So it's going to try to tie in some of those holes as best we can. Now on Pasa, because it's a 9 one side and 9 the other side, it's basically all throughout the back 9, and there's a really good video that Fried Egg have done on the routing of Pasatiempo and how the barranca comes into play in different ways on each hole of that back 9. And what we're going to try to do is maybe see if we can tie in, kind of go more horizontally, and can we tie it in across these holes a little bit more, because some of these holes are really going to need help, like 13, 14, they're going to need something, and it depends how we do it, because you don't want it to feel overused, you don't want it to feel like everything is a barranca versus coastline, and you also don't want it to be kind of every green you come to, oh, you're hitting across the barranca, or the tee shot, oh, you're hitting across it. Can we use it, I guess, differently? I think my philosophy with kind of a big feature like this is, if something's going to be a cornerstone to your course, introduce it early, introduce it well. So I think the main thing we're going to do on hole 1 is we're going to try to have it as like a driving hazard. Now at the moment, this is actually relatively low. So that's 8 feet below there. So the first thing we're going to do is bump this bit up. Computer is struggling a little bit today, but that's okay. So if we bump this land up a little bit just to make it more kind of even, and that fits with the land we've got as well, then we can get a bit more of an accurate driving distance of where this is. And what I'll do, there are two schools of thought in how you might do this. Yeah, now we're pretty level. So 285 is kind of driver distance. Now sometimes you want to go beyond that, so let's say we put it at 304, well that's now what I would term in my head as a rolling hazard. So you're going to bounce and you're potentially going to roll into it. Or we could put it at 280 where it's kind of, you are clearing it, but wind might make you think otherwise. You can put it bang on 285 and basically have it kind of as a diagonal hazard where the more you want to chew off, the more of the hazard you're going to have to take on. And the safe play is out here. Now if I was doing anything like that, I'll work the green really carefully so that, like, let's say the green angle is going to be like this. Maybe that way, coming over this line, you're going to have a pretty good angle to the green, and I might put a bunker somewhere like there. And that way, coming from that line is going to mean that you can kind of play around that bunker a little bit more. Whereas if you take the bail out and go over this side, you're coming directly over the bunker. And that's kind of the road hole template, basically. And so I think that's kind of how we're going to start this. We're going to have the barranca coming in roughly here. The exact distance we'll tweak. Because what we're going to do is we're going to basically hazard map now, and that's something that sounds like a really technical term. It isn't really. It's basically we're going to decide where we want our main hazard to be, and then we'll kind of route all the holes around that. Now we're also going to give you like a 2-wood layup-ish to here. I mean, it's a long hole. Do we start you with a par 4 or par 5? It's a long old par 4. So if you're laying up to here, I mean, you're looking at a good 220 in, maybe. So that might make me query whether I want to do that or not, because you're going to be kind of forced into going for it or not. Maybe I might like a third way where if you clear it, and this is where it gets tricky. So if you want to stop before it, how wide do we want this to be? Well, 30 yards feels about right, but 30 yards of distance is a long, long way. So this is probably, well, this is position A1. That's probably A2, even though you're coming over the bunker, you're coming in with a shorter-ish club, 198. Versus down here, 220 is going to be a lot harder to hold, and you've still got not an amazing angle. But anyway, we're starting it there, and part of the reason we're going to start it there is also so that we can bring it in so that you see it on the first tee. So all of this is just measure tool, and I'm kind of looking back and seeing at the tee and looking at where those tools are, and kind of just imagining, well, what if you saw basically a cliff packed with trees there? Is that going to make for an impactful first shot? I think it is, and it's going to really make that tee shot stand out to you. And you'll know kind of immediately where you are. So the question is, if we want it there, because we want to introduce it on 1, well, what other holes can we introduce it on? Definitely 15. And then that's a really nice spread within the routing. Like you get it on 1, and then later on in 15 you see the same barranca, and maybe it's like, oh yeah, that's what that is. Well, we could then take it down through to 16. We can bring it all the way up this side of the hole. We could bring it down into 2. I guess the question is whether that's now feeling too sprawling, like it's going all over the place. And you don't want it to be kind of all barranca. But I can certainly see it coming, maybe if it comes across the front of 15. And maybe we have it kind of doing the reverse thing here, where actually if you play to the inside of the dogleg, well, you're carrying less of a barranca to get up to there. But this is a short hole, I seem to remember. Yeah, so I've got less of an issue with getting people to lay up on this one. But here, we used it on the tee shot, we're now going to use it on the approach shot. And we'll kind of drag it in around here somewhere. And that might now think about, well, how are we going to join that up? I don't know, maybe we go all the way around here. I think it probably plays visually more on 1. So now we'll start looking at our measure tools again, and we'll go, well, if you were up here, let's imagine that's you looking down on here. You're probably not really seeing that, so we want to bring it in a little bit more. It's not really in play, but visually is cool as well. I mean, we could now, if you wanted to, back the green right up against it. I don't think you need to, and I think we can use that trick later on. I also, in terms of something like this with a big hazard, I wouldn't necessarily pull out all the stops the very first time you use it. The key with this is going to be restraint, really. So we're looking at 15 and we're now going to go, well, so it's coming all the way down here. It's going to be a kind of wasty area. Maybe we offer you a big drive all the way out there. It goes somewhere like that. Now 16, well, we've got a par 3, and par 3s we want to make memorable as best we can. We've got this one into really good lighting. I think with this one we could probably have it where you're playing across the Barranca again. And I think I'm going to break one of my own rules with this, which is I'd ideally rather you didn't pull the same trick twice, in that this time if we're going out here you're hitting kind of across it, if you're hitting down here you're not. But with this one I think a par 3 like this is too good an opportunity to miss. We're going to have maybe this entire area as a low point being Barranca. Actually maybe that works, maybe this is kind of mountainish top. We're kind of taking that in there a little bit more. And then this is the proper low point. So maybe we want to just do a little bit of sculpting to remind ourselves of that. And you can immediately see how that par 3 is going to play. And it will look a lot more intimidating for having that. So now where do we want to go? Well, we've used it on the left of this hole, kind of the right of this hole, which is also something that's worth looking at. We've used a tee shot, approach shot, visually, mostly visually. And I'm kind of treating this as a water hazard that's really more fluid, and I mean, pardon the pun, but in the sense that we can really put this wherever we want it to be. Just realised I've used kind of the wrong measure tools to go round this one. And the beauty with measure tools, I think, is at any point we could just go in and go, just clear all this out, and you can do kind of trial and error relatively visually and get an idea for whether something works or not. So at the moment we've got it looking like this. Now the ones at Pasa are huge and sprawling, and they come in, and what they've actually done is they've kind of built housing areas around where they aren't, so it's not as artificial as this might look. Now it might also be we have a little rise where one of them, where the Barranca doesn't quite go in, because that way you can kind of walk around. We're going to have a little bridge over this one anyway, and that'll add to visuals on 15 as well. And again, it's a hole that's going to need it because the lighting's not great. But if we've got a dip with a ravine and kind of loads of sunken trees and stuff, that'll do some of our work for us, and it will make it a bit more memorable. Now I would like the idea of bringing it in on 1 and also on 18, and even 9. So if we can tie these 3 together, I wonder whether that will be enough. It does mean that 13 and 14 are not going to get a lot of help, which is unfortunate, but maybe that's just the way it's got to be. Equally, you might recall from yesterday that there's this one area that I wanted to use with a little drop off in front of a par 3. So I think potentially that could be a separate one. Or do we want to join up this whole thing round here? Okay, we've had it down the left of 15T, kind of in and across for 16T. I'm starting to think we can do something with it on the right hand side of 17 and really make you play out. And we want you to attack the right anyway. Hiya Jamie. Maybe this is a hazard that you want to kind of... So my default with this often is basically to go to where's driver distance and put it on the left hand side because more people tend to miss left. But this is going to be a lot of let's kind of think about how we can use this in multiple different ways. So Jamie, we're looking at potentially using one kind of big hazard and sprawling it across different holes at different points in different ways, so be it approach shot, tee shot, just visual, whatever. And it's this idea of having a big barranca kind of filled with trees, etc. Now 15 could even be, we don't want it to come in too much, I think. And we do want it to branch through 18, I think, as well. Now the idea with this was about giving life to some of these holes that didn't really have anything helping them. I kind of think 17 is going to be okay anyway. What we could do that we haven't had yet is have like a split fairway, like properly split. It's kind of eaten into one, but on one I'm going to route around it. Now we could do that on 17, or we could do it on 18. And have 18 where you are actually just hitting over it first time. But with 18, I don't want it to be a par 5 where you're laying up because, well, I've already made that very uphill anyway. No, but that's okay because these two are going to go more uphill anyway. These two are going to be higher so that you can be looking down on that little coastal area we created yesterday. So all of this just big moves just to get the land looking roughly. The more I get an idea of it, how I feel it should do in my head. We're also going to lower this green a bit. As you can see, from what was 50 yards we're down to 30. Which feels about right to me. Now I did have one idea earlier that I really liked, which was having the clubhouse situated atop that barranca. And I think having that coming in this way would be very cool. Which means I think that it's coming all the way down the right hand side of 18. However we want to do this. Now therefore what I might do is put a bunker in here. Maybe stagger a couple. And make you basically choose between bunkers on the left and kind of opening up the green that way. I don't know, I don't like that as much. Because really, we're now thinking about, well, what's the biggest hazard we've got on this hole? Bunkers, relatively trivial in the game. Kind of being at the bottom of a big ravine, big problem. So we want you to play out as far right as possible. So even now, we're way off designing this hole. But I'm kind of thinking, well, where would we put a green to make you want to go right? Maybe the answer is we bring trees in around this side. So that if you're going left, you're then flirting with trees there, whereas if you're going right, you're opening up the view over that. Actually, I really like that, so I think that's what we're going to do. And I'm just going to plant a couple of trees just to remind myself of this. Doesn't really matter which ones, we'll just put a couple in. But then that'll make my idea of the tee shot really straightforward. And I think also you look at this as an 18th finisher, and you go, yeah, that can really work. If we've got a green, kind of not backed up against the barranca, but something like that, you're kind of visualising, well, we're going to have a little barranca there that's rooted us in our round. You've got trees, you've got a green sitting atop it. You know what, I think that works nicely as a closer, and it's a big heroic shot to get there. Now in terms of if you go this way, where would our layups be? Well, you can lay up down here and pitch on, or you can try and hit over down to this little area. I can see that working nicely. I mean, in terms of what other options you might have, well, you might want to be able to do it where hitting down the left and then hitting through kind of an up there. I don't know, that doesn't appeal to me quite as much. Okay, so now that we've got an idea of where this is going to be routed, and I think I might even bring it further up here. Yeah, I think we're dropping quite a few frames again, unfortunately. Maybe this one has to just be recorded and go up to YouTube secondly. We'll see. Disconnected, reconnecting in 7 seconds. Brilliant. Wonder if I just lower this a little bit. Just playing around with settings on the fly. See how that goes. Ah, helpful. I've lost internet. Really useful. Let's try this again. Comfortably the least exciting portion of the tutorial videos when you lose internet and have to reload everything. And there's that connection going. Okay, and we should be reconnected. Alright, and didn't have to stop recording, so all should be well. Yeah, I've just seen it was stopping. I was playing around with the settings a little bit because we were dropping quite a few frames. So I've just cut the stream and started over. And hopefully that works. If not, I'll just have to record the rest of this offline and then upload to YouTube that way. So we kind of decided where we're going on 18 and what we're going to be doing. I think early days, but that's a hole I quite like the look of. Could equally have it going around the back of this and then it will be a double hazard in on 14. I think there's an option. Something like that, perhaps. And then we see it on 14, we see the 18th green. Now this one's going to be a little bit harder to pull off, I think, because those two greens are going to have to be same height. Yeah, I don't know, this one might feel a little bit more forced. So I wonder if we move the 14th green up a little bit. And then that gives me a little bit more space to work with. Which theme? This one is Delta. I mean, the theme is kind of inconsequential at this point. It will probably be Delta just because of how I want to sync trees in to create this barranca we're talking about, but it could be Delta or Tropical. They both have the same types of trees for what I want to do. Or potentially Steppe, but I find Steppe a lot trickier. Delta is just one of those themes I find relatively easy to work in. Okay, so we're now looking at how can we tie this into 18 a little better. So we've said all the way down this side we're going to have this kind of barranca element. Maybe it comes in there. Somewhere up here. And then it's this hazard on this side. Yeah, it's just being weird. I don't understand it, but it says we're now not dropping any frames. I mean, it might partly be because I was trying to stream at too high a bit rate. I don't know. I don't understand these things well enough. So therefore, maybe 17 is our one where you definitely have to hit over it. But if so, we're doing so at 200 yards. That's kind of pointless. That's not going to punish anyone. Now, if we're doing it around 280, that'll be more interesting. I wonder about something like that. essentially you'll have a really safe layup anywhere around this side. On here, you're kind of looking, if you're going for right hand side, you're looking at, well, can you hit a 1-iron and stop? Something like that. Down this side, maybe we give you a little bit more room with like a 2-wood or something along those lines to land it. Or if you want to go with driver, do we want to ever let you clear it? Maybe. Maybe we do something like that. This is now getting all horribly, horribly messy in terms of the measure tools. So what I might do is just take some of them out. When you get used to this process, it does get a lot quicker. So I think with this hole, what I'm now kind of coming along lines of saying is right is going to be your best line for sure. So if we can clear it to here, like with a fast or downwind, then you've got a lob wedge into a really unguarded green. Maybe we just move that green slightly this way as well to factor that in. If you go left, perhaps you're kind of not short-siding yourself, but let's say we've got a green that works this way with bunkers. Probably do a couple there, and it's going to be really clear which side you want to be coming in on. Might be one way of doing it. And maybe we can even open up this area a little bit more, so you see a bit more coastline as well. That would be quite cool. Now, what is striking me is the fact that this is now really sprawling as a feature, but it is coming in on a number of holes. One of the things I wanted to do with this was try to maximise its effectiveness. So although it's going to be quite a large feature, we're going to say it's like relatively natural. It's coming in on 15, on 1, 15, 16, 17, 18, 14. Now what I don't love about this is the fact that it's basically just your closing 4 holes plus hole 1. And 14, in which case you're closing 5 holes plus hole 1. I'd love to get this feature in somewhere around about here as well. So the question is, how are we going to be able to do that, and are we going to be able to do that? Maybe it's a case that we take it across 18T and 9th T. I don't really want it going across too many holes though. Or do we bring it down here and then it's kind of in play on 9 and 10? Even just visually on the 10th. I think maybe that's the way to do it without cheating too much. Does mean that 18 is now this happy little island in the middle of a barranca, which I don't love. But on the plus side, and a lot of this would be stuff that I tweak when I start playing it and when I start finalising designs and what have you, but all of this was basically just to map out, does this work as an area? So in terms of how we've got it, you can go 1 and you can hit over it or around it. So tee shot hazard and then visual on approach shot. Game is frozen. Are we okay? Yeah, we're still okay. 2 you won't have it, 3 you won't have it, but 3 opens up to the coastline, which is our other big feature. 4 is coastline as well. No, this is going to be a barranca, which is basically kind of a big kind of tree-filled ravine essentially. Now it's going to take quite a bit of work to get it like that, but we should be able to manage it. My computer is struggling big time this afternoon. 6 is going to have coastline, so we don't need it. We're then going to head up 7. I wonder whether I could clear out some of those trees and you get an idea of it. Probably not. 8 is going to have it, because actually we were going to bring it in on this side of 8 a little bit. Just as like a smaller separate one. And then maybe that comes in on the 9th tee shot, which would then probably mean that I don't need to do this bit, which I think would make me a lot happier. So I do want it popping up on 9, but I don't want it feeling too gimmicky in terms of how it's come all the way around. That said, having it behind 9 is an option. But in any case, you're going to see it and you'll be anchored to the course because of it. So 9, then you're going to have 10 where you won't have it. 11 where you hit the coast again, so you don't need it. 12, you're hitting the coast again, you don't need it. 13 is just going to have to be a good hole design to cope without any kind of big feature. 14, you then have it again. 15, you have it and you're hitting across it. 16, you're hitting across it as a par 3. 17, you're hitting kind of between it or over it. And then 18, it's alongside and then potentially over. So, having gone through all of this, the one thing that's kind of striking me is a lot of the time you're hitting over it rather than kind of edging up to it. I guess 1, you're going alongside. 15, you're going alongside, you're not hitting over until here. No, I think we're okay with this. So what we're essentially saying is, I guess the guiding principle for me on this is, if you had to put one of these big features in, what's your kind of biggest, your smallest footprint for the biggest effect, if that makes sense, and then try to route around that. Now, because of this, I might end up coming in kind of tweaking my routing a little bit further. So I might, and you'll have seen that with one of the greens, we moved a little bit closer. I think, was it the first? I can't remember. Oh, 18th green, we definitely looked at moving as well. So with this in mind, are we happy with all of the holes and can we move any of them to, I guess, have a little bit of a bigger impact with this feature? In 14, we could potentially position the green here and have you really flirting with the edge unless you open up the angle. That could be fun. And to do that, I might move the tee forward a little bit as well. Yeah, any sort of feature like this is great. CC course would be interesting in terms of how you use it, because obviously it can be quite punitive if you end up in it. But yeah, this could equally just be waste bunkers if you wanted them to be. It could be the exact same principle applies to, I guess, a river or anything else along those lines. Can be shoreline as well in terms of how you use it, but I think really it's maximising that effect. Now when I eventually then come to placing this down, I think the way I would do it is take a rock, kind of make it a relatively large size, and just spam it around the lines. I'm not going to do it now because I'm not quite ready to do it yet. But I'd kind of just trace it all out and just click intermittently. So just to give you an example, if we're deciding it's going to be here, we'll just do this. And you'll see if you don't quite click quickly enough, then you lose where it is. But this, and I might be really, really careful where I've determined exactly where it is. Now you can always, to kind of undo all of this, you can either hit the undo button, or if you're doing it later, you can just go back in, find the rock, multi-select, area, and as long as you're not going over anything else, we're going to be able to delete all of that this way anyway. But the reason I would do that is because I clear measure tools out all the time, and I don't want to lose, particularly if I'm doing a bunker shape or something. I want to be able to clear the measure tools out, so the more kind of stuff I have like this, where it's just tools, the kind of worse it will be eventually. The reason I'm not going to place rocks down yet is because I'm not sold on a lot of the elevation changes. So for example, if I'd placed a rock, I mean it probably would go with the terrain actually because I haven't sunk it. But I don't really want to be moving terrain and losing where it is and those sorts of things. And in fact, I think if we're going on top of the ground, we're okay to do it. So I might just do it now. Just so I've got an idea of where I've put this. And a lot of these I will eventually tweak all of them anyway. It's just kind of like really just a template or a guideline at the moment. And at some point it eventually just decides it's had enough with you clicking rocks and pauses anyway. I'm certain there are better ways of doing this, but it's kind of the easiest way I've found of having it. Maybe we do bring it down here. Let's leave it as an option. And then we decided that I think the clubhouse being there, kind of in your 18th tee line, so that you can see it off the tee is a good idea, but also that you'll have a chance to see the barranca one final time incorporated as part of where the clubhouse is. And we'll do this one as well. Now, also I might want to just pop down a couple of little surfaces to remind myself of where I want different things. So if I'd said I wanted a bunker here, potentially one here, and then we maybe wanted a green going kind of lengthways in that sort of area, I might just pop simple shapes down just to remind me of those things. Same with this one, we'd said actually this one was going to be relatively straight to reward you if you go left. And did we want those two bunkers, or do we want to just let you be blocked out? Not sure yet. Is there anything else we'd marked out? Nope. I'm just going to clear all of those, and you can now see pretty easily as well from a height where our barranca is going to be, which is quite a nice way of doing it. So I think I wanted to give like a slightly long, another kind of more fleshed out example of how this would look. I'm going to have to sign in again, aren't I? So there have been a couple of really good examples I can think of people who do this well. I'm going to dip into my own back catalogue. I think probably the best example I've got of using a feature like this would be Cayuma Bay, which was my World Cup course. And this wasn't a barranca, this was using a river. So the same principle applies. I did it exactly the same way, kind of routed the course at the beginning, and then went through and kind of thought, how can you use the river in multiple different ways, tweaked exactly where it was so that it would come into holes deliberately on different ways in different types of shots, etc. And also, again, same here, we've got lots of coastline. So I wonder if I just go into probably play mode. It doesn't matter where we're on. And then probably flying through the camera version will be the best way of doing this. So you can see a sort of barranca kind of develop. This will be eventually how it kind of looks. This one's in tropical, so it's going to look a little bit different to the one we get in Delta. But again, I wanted to basically anchor the course away from the coastal holes. So you've got all of this cliff top coastline here, and kind of it was more away from that, which is a nice crutch, but a crutch nonetheless. How do you basically stop the course becoming one-dimensional away from the coastline? And one of the things I wanted to do was put in a river, and I knew that I had a kind of waterfall potentially, and that how it would work and whether it was going to be the right height, all of those sorts of things. So what I thought I would do would be to put a river in somewhere where the holes, and if we zoom all the way out, you kind of see how the plot works. Now, this one's a bit cheaty. You've got coastline on 3 sides. It's a proper peninsula course, and it abuses the coastline about as much as you possibly can. But there we are. Whereas the one I'm trying to work on now is basically only using one side. You can also see the scale of this course. I mean, we've used practically the whole plot because some of the fairways are just giant. But you'll notice that you've got coastline used basically all the way around here. And you hit it at slightly different points in the round as well. So it was then, how do you make the inland holes a little bit more interesting? My decision was to come up with a river that's basically making its way to the ocean that way. It's a little bit fantasy, but it's fine. So kind of coming from source up here, first of all you have it playing in the background of 9. So on your 9th approach you can see exactly where it is and kind of where it's coming to, which is an underutilized feature, just purely visually. On 18 is probably 18 plays as stroke index 1. It's the most difficult hole on the course, partly because the way the green is kind of banked into the river means anything slow goes in. So we've got it on the right hand side of an approach on 18. We then, on 17, UT over it. So you're hitting over it purely visually, but actually if you challenge all the way right and try to get down here, which is the best angle into the green, you can bump yourself down into it. On 16, it comes in pretty visually on the approach, and again, it's on the right hand side, but really this one's only visual. You've got the low point there. It's this kind of valley style hole where you hit to the top of a peak, and then you're hitting across to this green side, which was always just really cool. But again, the water's just kind of there so that really it can progress to around here. 11, you have it on the right. If I have one little self nitpick on this course, I have many, it would be that the water never came as much in on this hole as I would have liked it to. I think it's planted really nicely. I'd have liked it to come into here and maybe push this bunker over, because people all just went for this line. Nobody ever really challenged the water, even me. And I think that could have been better, because a lot of all the coastline pretty much we challenge it on the left hand side of each hole, so it would have been nice to have water on the right of this one. It's then on the par 3 15th, so you play across it there. I think its best utilisation though is on this hole, so the short par 4 drivable 14th, and it's actually behind. Now, I had to work quite a bit of the sculpting so that you could see where the water was off the tee, and you can just see it down through here. But because carry distance to that pin is about 288 maybe, you'll have people hitting driver, hitting the green and bouncing in because they've just basically taken off too much club, which I thought was a really nice hazard in terms of it's not the way many people would use water on a drivable par 4, and it worked out really nicely. It comes in on 7, so you'll notice again the trick of bringing something in earlier in the routing and kind of making it a really prominent feature. On 7 you've got a choice whether you hit to here or you hit to here. Most people will go down this way and challenge the water, but if you pull it left you've basically got a bogey straight away. But it's your choice. And then finally it comes into play on 12, and again on an approach where it doesn't really matter, it doesn't feature. Apart from it being pretty visual. And I could have put the green right the other side of the water, but I felt that was a bit too gimmicky and wasn't as natural as I'd have wanted it. So kind of you look back up at it and you see it follows it does follow a natural path. It's kind of not going, we're going to use it on 1 and 2 and 3 and then we're going to loop back and do 9 and this and that and the other, which I would definitely try to avoid. It follows a natural path down to the ocean with a couple of bends and turns, and actually it follows the land as well, so it is the low point throughout the course. It does kind of logically make sense. So yeah, that's kind of that course as an example. I'm trying to think if I've got one more that I might be able to show. I think I do. Um, so the second example of a river that maybe I would use, have I got another one? Of one big feature would be probably, oh yes, this one. Hiya Dylan. Yeah, this is a little two-parter. So this is going back to, this is my second ever course, I think. Second proper course. And this one I really like, but you'll notice straight away that it's by far and away, of course I need to go to play course first. I'd say the routing here is less sophisticated than some of my later ones. Here I mean Greenstone River by name. I wanted it to have kind of a big river that was your centerpiece. Now you'll also notice that this is my previous delta. I really cheated with the river here. Like you've got one coming through here and then another one coming here. And you can kind of get away with it if you work carefully on it. But as a result, I basically tried to join them up and make them look a little bit more sensible. But I do think this routing is probably still one of my favourites in terms of where the holes took you. So you had one that was inland, two that then went inland as well. Now 3 was where the river kind of came in, again approach. 4, you had the big kind of, the same kind of concept, but everything was just a lot bigger and yeah. I mean, I really enjoy this course, but there's a few things where you can tell it's a newer designer, really. And I think the width of the river is one of them. It's just giant and sprawling. 5 was my favourite. It's this kind of cape hole where you're biting off as much of the river as you can choose, and also kind of gets the best lighting. You then, kind of similar to the routing we just done, worked your way out to the ocean and kind of made your way down to 7, and then 8 was right on the ocean as well, and again really maximised that. And then 9 you were coming up a separate river or the same river but just from a different angle, because 5th green was just there, so we'd kind of done a little loop from there. So again, hitting the same feature at a slightly different time. But you then had to cross to get to this one, so that's an inland hole. Now, I was quite happy with this one. It had a great setting. I never loved the hole, but the setting was good. And again, you're kind of seeing the same river, the big feature, but from a different angle. You then turn away from it and have another kind of inland hole, which is one of my favourites I've ever built. It just came out really nicely, and I've tried to replicate it again and never quite gotten close. You then hit across the river, but this one looks a bit more coastal. Let's just not look at the cliff edges, they're horrible. 13 you then played at coast, and you can kind of again see that coastal holes you don't need to do that much with. They kind of take care of themselves. But what we were talking about the other day in terms of how can you maximise your coast usage, well, there's a little bit of it on here. 6 you see the coast from your approach. 7 you hit all the way along it. 8 you then do that little par 3, so you're seeing out again, and then we come back to it from the other side, and you see it again with kind of par 3, par 4. But I do think this one was kind of a good example of what I was professing not to do the other day, which is there's all this coastline, and I have literally used all of it on this course. If we zoom out, you will see that it's gone pretty much as far as you can go. So there, and that's it. And really, that's like 1, 2, 3 holes that are right on the coastline. A couple of them, so 13 came in there, you're seeing it. 6 came in there. But actually, if you use kind of holes that feed over previous parts of the routing, I think you can do better, which is what we're trying to do with the newer one. But again, we then did the cheeky trick of having a similar river that looks very similar. 15 is still one of my favourite holes I've ever built. There were lots of them on this course. I just had loads of ideas and they came out pretty nicely. 16, river's not really in play other than visually. 17, you hit over it. And then 18, you hit over it on the approach shot. Now, in terms of also cheating with routing and kind of... cheating's a strong word. But how can you make something, I guess, work to your best advantage? This was the first course that I ever did when I was trying to kind of manage lighting. and I knew that there were a couple of holes that were going to get absolutely destroyed by the lighting, and I knew there were going to be some that were going to be absolute winners. The two that I used that were dead away from the lighting were 15, which is a really strong strategic par 5, where you want to play left and then left again to hit that little green there, and 9, which is again a par 5 over a river. You'll notice the same sort of idea, but in this case you're holding onto the right hand side in order to get round at the green behind a giant mound. So I knew those two holes were going to struggle for lighting. I also knew 16 was going to struggle, and that's the hole that took me the longest to build. So how do you get around that? Well, for me, firstly, you do kind of walks between tees. So you've got a green right the way here because we've made the most of that lighting. We're then going to jolt you forward 70 yards or so here to the tee. We're going to then use a long hole, and we're going to make it a really strategic hole so that even though the lighting looks crap, it's still you're going to remember it because it's a really memorable, tough approach. And that approach shot to that green is the hardest one on the course. And then 16, we're going to make just a quirky hole. So it's a punch bowl green that gathers everything in, and actually you can drive over all of it and try and bounce it on. Or you can bail out to the side and then go that way. I mean, that kind of ate up a good, what are we looking, kind of 200 yards probably, 700. And actually we could have moved this hole even further forward. And rather than the trick of going into good lighting where you might take the tees and put them behind the green so that you've got more space to work with. Like imagine your holes going here, then here, then here. You can kind of put 3 holes in where you might have had 2. With this sort of lighting, you might be wanting to do 1 here and then a walk forward and then 1 here. The other thing that I would have done with this one, which I remember very vividly, so you'll see the walk between 16 and 17 is again pretty sizable. Going up to there. Originally, part of the reason why the tees are back there for 16 is because originally the green was out here and we were going to play 17 that way. But it worked better. And then 17 to 18 again, you've got a little walk. And the final trick I think I pulled with this routing, which I'm completely comfortable with, and if I were judging it, I would have no problems with this. And in fact, I've just done it on my major course as well. The clubhouse is here and the first tee is a little walk away. Because actually you're going, I mean, it's less than this on the major course. There's a short distance. But I don't have a problem with the first tee not being right next to the clubhouse. If you've got practice facilities, we used a range to eat up lots of the space. Practice green, little walk, first tee. For me, that's fine. And that kind of came round to, I was getting to this hole, and I was just like, I've got a perfect 18th green location right here. Do I want to move it there just so I can get a clubhouse in? And the answer was no. I had no desire to do that. So that's this one. And this one I think is a good example of, I think, routing around a major feature, but also we talked the other day about having a really tight routing so that you didn't have to plant everything. Now, if we zoom out, you'll kind of see just how much of the plot we've used. So the course we're doing currently, we've used the coastline an awful lot, and we've gone basically in managing to put every single hole in here. So that would be kind of that half. God, it's hard to draw on a diagonal line. Might spin it around. So yeah, if you imagine all of the holes are kind of in that sort of space, that's all of this that we don't have to plant. So I think that's part of it, and I had this giant area here that needed planting, this area, these bits, and like there's lots of, I would say, inefficient routing on this course. It works, and it works nicely, but I think you can save yourself a lot of bother, and also just really improve your views on each hole if you have holes that are building out other holes as you kind of build them. And I didn't know about that when I was doing this. I only kind of really cottoned onto it later on. So anyway, I think that's going to be this one done. That's kind of covered routing briefly, and particularly that kind of big hazard. So we'll go back into that and just kind of by way of comparison and just to tidy this up. So we are looking over here, and it's tutorial course, I believe. So compared to that plot, which we've just seen, we now know we're using, oh yeah, the stupid camera. We're now using far, far less of it. So with greenstone, the holes were coming down to about here. We've managed to reduce that pretty effectively by about 30%. We've talked about kind of using one big hazard and making the most of it and making a feature that kind of incorporates itself into many different holes. And we've outlined that with the rocks just so we've got an idea of how that's working. Additionally, one of the things we try to talk about is, now whether we've succeeded or not will depend on the final product. Whether this course ever makes the light of day, I don't know. It's really just a tutorial project. Trying to use the same feature in multiple different ways on multiple different holes. So we've gone from 1 to, so it's coming on 1. We said we're then going to have the coastline kind of doing its thing, and that's a separate feature. So if we go through the holes, how many of them are without either coastline or barranca? Well, 2 is without. 3 is going to open up onto the coastline, so that's not coast, 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 coast. 7 is not. 8 is going to have that barranca. 9 is going to have barranca. 10 is not. 11 hits coast. 12 hits coast. 13 is not. And everything else has the barranca in it. So we've got 3 holes across the course that have neither barranca nor coastline. And therefore I think they're going to kind of be tied in by the fact that they are not, and they are just your kind of standard delta sort of holes. But equally in my mind I'll be thinking, well, those ones are ones where I'm going to have to save some really good ideas for, particularly 13. Because 13 is going dead away from the sun. And really it's just a transition hole, so we've got to make that interesting somehow. So anyway, that's me done for this episode, and hopefully gives you a little bit more of an idea of what I do and I guess how I plan on kind of coming up with a course and those sorts of things. But anyway, good to have you all with us, and catch you again soon.